Happy squares. When your opponent has one final pawn that they are trying to make into a queen, you can always prevent that from happening by staying on the two happy squares, which are the two squares directly in front of the pawn. By staying on these squares, black will never be able to promote. If we go back to e2, staying on the happy squares, the only way for black to make progress would be to push his king over. And now, of course, taking away our only other happy square. But whenever this happens, we simply meet the king. And by doing this, we have created a wall, and the black pawn has to push forward. And now when the black pawn pushes, we of course have two new happy squares that we can go to. Either one is perfectly fine. Let's go to e2. And then after the black king goes to e4, of course we're still on the happy squares. When black decides it's time to try to win, they will go king f3. And now of course we can't go to our happy square, and so we need to meet the king. This of course creates another wall, and black's only option is to push forward. And this allows us to go to our one and only happy square, the only one we need. King will go to e1, and then after black plays king e3, we are in stalemate. Our king is sitting on the only safe square, the happy square, which makes us happy, happy, happy. Critical squares. When you've got one final pawn you're attempting to promote, make sure you remember the critical squares. You always need to get your king first to the 6th row, and then your pawn to the 5th right behind it, and then you'll have your chance to win. So let's get our king to the critical squares first. Let's say that black comes over here, and we go to e4. Now at this point, it looks like we can't make any progress because the black king is stopping us. Now we might go to the 6th rank on the next turn, so black stops that. But that's okay, because when we meet the king again, we again have 3 threats. To go to the 6th rank, he can't stop all 3 of them. Let's say he moves to the side, and we go up to f6. Now our kings are on the first row of critical squares. It's just time to get our pawn to the 5th row. Say the king charges our pawn, it's no problem. We go pawn e4 and pawn e5, and then you just got to figure out the way to win. Here I think the best way is to go king e6, lining up our king one final time. You can't stop us from getting to the 7th rank, and once our king's on the 7th rank, he controls all the squares, and promotion happens right after that. Rook pawns. When the final remaining pawn is a rook pawn, the defending side, in this case white, typically has much easier drawing chances. The key is to be able to reach the corner. After white plays the move king g1, they're able to do just that. Black will push the pawn to h3 to try to make progress, and after king h1, the only way to push forward is with h2, which results in a stalemate, thanks to the king being trapped in the corner. Now, interestingly, there is even more drawing resources with rook pawns. Here, white cannot get to the corner after black plays the move king to h2. But the thing is, white's still drawing after the move king f1. Now, black will make progress by going h4 and h3, but then after king f1, black has a tough choice to make. The black king can try to go out of the corner with king g3, but that allows king g1. White's getting to the corner, and the game will be a draw. If instead they choose to play king h1, now a really funny thing happens. White will play king f2, and after h2, king f1, and this is a stalemate. Black, who's ahead material, got stalemated by white. Outside passer. To the untrained eye, this situation on the board might look totally even, given the 3 versus 3 situation we have. Some people might even say black is better since black's pawns are closer to promotion. But this couldn't be further from the truth, because white holds the trump card. If you notice that white's passed pawn is the outermost passed pawn, while black's pawn is more inside, then you'll know that white can win this game. Here, white can simply use the pawn to distract the black king way off to the edge of the board. And once the king has been distracted, we'll use this situation to trade off the passed pawn. Now we've left ourselves in a situation where our king is much better placed than our opponents. And there's nothing black can do about this. We'll race over to the queen side, win the remaining pawns, and win the game. Protected passer. Chess pros know to never take the free pawn in f5 in this situation, because if we did, after a few king moves, and then a few pawn trades, black would be in a situation to take white's remaining pawn and draw the game. Instead, we should use this opportunity to make a check on the king, creating a protected pass pawn. A pawn that is past all of the enemy pawns that could potentially stop it, and is protected by one of our pawns. And since the black king can never take the forward pawn, nor ever go behind the passed pawn, given we would be able to promote our pawn, he's going to simply instead have to stay in front of the pawn, allowing us to now make the trades on the queen side, and then come back to the king side to escort our pawn to the end of the board. The square. An easy way to calculate whether a pawn can get to the end of the board before an enemy king can snuff it out is by checking the square of the pawn. You can draw a diagonal in your mind from your pawn to the end of the board and then make a square based on that. If the enemy king can get inside the square, or is already inside the square, then he'll be able to catch the pawn. When white pushes, and again pushes, and again pushes, you'll notice that the king is able to stop this pawn because he was inside the square the whole time. Just remember the one exception. Here it looks like the black king can absolutely stop the white pawn because you're inside the square. But just remember, it's white to move, and white can push the pawn 2 squares forward, creating a box the black king will never be able to get into. So the way you got to calculate a pawn on the second row is pretend as if it was on the third row. And once you draw this box, you'll notice that yes, the black king is not inside. Therefore, with correct play, white can win. And after b4 and b5 and b6 and b7, and you promote, you'll notice you're safe and you win the game. Triangulation. Here white would just love it if it were black to play, because black would have to back up and then white could enter in, winning the h6 pawn and the game shortly thereafter. But it's white to play, so white has to shuffle the king over, and black will play king f8. And the win is not as straightforward as you might think. If we play the move king e6, then black will meet our king, and after f7, black will find shelter in front of our pawn. And once we play the move over to f6, we've created stalemate, and the game is over. So what option do we have? Well, instead here of trying to advance immediately, we can triangulate, which is just moving the king in a triangular pattern in order to get a lost tempo and switch the move over to our opponent. And so we'll start with the move king f4. Now black has a couple options. If they go to f7, then actually we've triangulated a different way, and black has to go back with the king, and we enter into h6 and win the game in just a moment. So instead, black would play the move king e8. But then we continue with our triangulation and go king e4. Black will go back to f8 and then king e5. And we've made this triangulation. Now it's black to play, and black loses. Of course, black cannot bring the king down to f7 since we just go back to g6. And if black plays king to e8, then we meet the king with e6, and we promote the pawn. Just remember, in this position, don't promote to a queen, because that would be stalemate. So instead, move the king, and now black has to move check. Zugzwang. If you ever notice your opponent's pieces are in a tenuous situation, just barely holding everything together, think about how you can make it to where any move they made lost to the game. That's what Zugzwang is. If we play the move king d4, suddenly we're threatening to go into c5, d5, or e5 to try to capture some material. But of course, black's king has that all covered. But black's in Zugzwang. Black has to move and give way to our king. If the king moves over to e6, we'll go to c5, and now the king has to back up to d7, and we actually have our choice of which pawn to take. I'd probably go capture on b5, giving ourselves a protected b-pawn, and we'll win this game very soon. Outflanking. When your opponent has set up a seemingly impenetrable blockade, consider stepping outside in a maneuver called outflanking to get around the blockade. Notice we've created our own little blockade here, so the king has to step away. That allows our king to get a little closer. But then after the black king creates another blockade, we can again do another sidestep. This creates another blockade for the black king, and again he's forced away, and we get to come in to try to take this pawn. After black defends it and creates another wall for us, here we outflank one final time with king f7, and now the black king is forced away from the pawn. We win it, and with the beautiful outflanking maneuver, we will win this game. Pawn Trebuchet. Anytime you have two pawns stuck together like this, you need to be very careful how you approach the pawns. If white carelessly plays the move king f5, then black wins with the move king d4. This defends the threat to the e5 pawn while also activating a threat on e4. White, of course, is defending the pawn now, but it's white to play, and that's the problem. White has to step away from the pawn, since, of course, the f4 square is protected by the black pawn, and after we step away, black captures the pawn and promotes on e1 very soon. So the question is, how do we make progress? Well, instead we need to be more tactful with our approach and go with the move king f6. This creates the threat on the e-pawn, but now after black plays king d4 to defend and create the counter threat, now white has king f5, which defends and counterattacks e5. And now black's in the same situation as white was before. After king c5, white will capture on e5, and then white quickly promotes the pawn.